Yeah, March the 9th, 2022. I want to I guess discuss a variety of things that are sort of interrelated, but that's going to come across kind of some mixture here. I mean, of course, we've done several on the Ukraine situation, and that's kind of grinding on it the way it is, and but now we're kind of also focused on the whole energy issue, and the two are interrelated in the political world and so forth. Particularly, I think one thing that's been revealed here is that well, to start off with, yesterday President Biden, of course, put sanctions on to ban the importing of Russian oil and they always say in gas. They mean gasoline, or they actually mean natural gas, like liquefied natural gas. I didn't know we took any of that from Russia. I thought we were self-sufficient natural gas, but at any rate, the oil. And apparently, I'm assuming this only applies to new purchases. I have no idea how that's going to go exactly. I never saw any detail, but I mean, there are ships loaded with oil, Russian oil, that are coming into our ports, or will shortly, that were paid for before the sanctions were placed on. Prior to that, apparently most of the private industries, other than Royal Dutch Shell, had pretty much already ceased purchasing oil from Russia anyhow. And I guess they purchased a bunch at the last minute, so I don't know if they'll be holding a bag or what will happen on that. But the point is, going forward, we're looking for other sources. But unfortunately, the other sources tend to be kind of a mixture. They're talking about Venezuela, which we embargoed from them, and in which their production capacity has gone way down into their regime they have there. Iran, which has been under sanctions for years because of, well, I guess it goes back to all the support of terrorist activities and that sort of thing. And then Saudi Arabia, and there's a little kick there. As I understand yesterday, the Saudi Arabia wouldn't take Biden's phone call. And there's a reason for that, which kind of also ties into this whole situation with Ukraine. By the way, if you like these videos, please give me a like, subscribe. You can click the bell for notifications, and comments are appreciated. Okay, yeah, and of course on the Saudi Arabia thing, here's what's going on. There's nuclear negotiations are going on with Iran, where the Biden administration is trying to reinstate their failed nuclear deal that they had previously. And of course, Russia and China are two of the participants in the negotiation. And of course, it gives Russia a chance to kind of try to obstruct things. On the other hand, you have a really weird situation between Iran and Russia at this point, because on the one hand, you have the fact that Russia is a major arms supplier to Iran, of course. On the other hand, at times, Iran is doing things in Syria with respect to sending weapons to Hezbollah through Syria into Lebanon, which isn't really in the interest of the Russian-Syrian coalition interest, because that brings down Israeli air attacks on their assets, you see. So it's been a complex situation going on there for some time anyhow, before the whole Ukraine thing blew up. But the point is, it's generally understood that this will facilitate Iran eventually getting a nuclear bomb if this deal goes forward. Not only that, but it will unleash a lot of money that's been embargoed under these sanctions against Iran that they will now can use to improve their military forces and promote terrorist groups, or build their nuclear weapon, or whatever they want to do, build missiles to carry the weapon. And so obviously Saudi Arabia is highly threatened by this, obviously. And so they're upset that we're making this move, about as upset as Israel is, which is, of course, mixed up in the whole deal, you see, because they don't want a nuclear armed Iran across a very narrow strait from where they are, you see. So this is, well, you get the idea. It's a very messy situation right now. Probably Russia and China are obstructing the deal. And that's one reason why we've gone so hard on Russia, that there's no reason they shouldn't obstruct the deal, right? So it's an interesting situation. but that's kind of the background on that phone call thing. The other thing I ran into here, which I guess I heard hints of it, but now I'm understanding what the implications are a little better. Apparently, since Biden has been in, there's been all kind of pressure on the banking system not to lend cash to development projects to produce more oil and natural gas inside the United States. And also they put freezes on a lot of leases that the energy companies want to have. There's some other ones that I think they're considered not that productive and that they haven't done much with, but that's probably because a lot of that's based on their various geological surveys and analysis of, when you put this much money into drilling a test well there, is it very likely to produce anything? And that's the dichotomy that's going on there. I mean, really, the Biden administration is totally disingenuous, of course, on this. If there's any doubt about that, they are. I mean, they're lying as second only to Putin's, I guess. I mean, it's just like whatever. What can you say? But anyway, that's kind of the situation there. And of course, that goes forward as not the cancellation of the pipeline, which I don't know exactly whether it would be operational, but now it certainly would have been if the Biden administration hadn't fought it. But but the point is, anything you do now is going to take, I heard an estimate, 8 to 10 months before any significant domestic production could really be ramped up. Given the time it actually takes from the go ahead to getting financing to getting the people hired to actually doing the work and getting then everything you need to do to actually get it to a refinery. It's going to take time. So I always get an argument between the near-term aspects of the energy problem and the longer-term aspects. I mean, in a year from now, if we had the right policies, we could start doing a lot of domestic production, I think. In 2 years, definitely. But it takes time to get this all going, and that's the same problem in which Europe's in. It's easy for the United States to not take Russian oil because they can buy on the international market if necessary, at a bid up price, and then we'll pay more at the pump. We can do that. That can be done, you see. But the problem you have is, we have the point is that means that crowds somebody else that's poorer than we are out of the market, and so probably Russia will find a market in the poorer countries for their petroleum. They may be what they used to call the north-south divide, between the industrialized, economically powerful countries in the north and the poorer countries in the southern hemisphere. I think it may not all be southern, but you get the idea. And then China, which China apparently is trying to. We've actually forced a Chinese-Russian bloc by our policies, if you go back to several videos back a few months ago, at the beginning of my discussions, that's been my main theme on this whole thing. It's not any kindness toward the Russians as such. It just would be in our interest to try to split the two apart rather than force them into an alliance. Because in some ways they each have things the other one doesn't have as much of. I mean, increasingly that is probably a little less true, but I mean, China has people, China has money, China has technology, Russia has natural resources, and an established nuclear warfare capability. China is building theirs, but I mean, Russia's has a legacy one. So the result is you put the two together, and there's also positioning in various parts of the world. I mean, so, and I guess China will also rely on Iran a lot for oil and stuff. So, you get what I'm saying, that a lot of this has really been very destructive. And of course, the reason I'm arguing that the horror you see every day on the cable news coming out of Ukraine is because of the failed diplomacy and the policies we pursued versus the Russians that led to this. Now, does that justify anything Russia did? No, I think Russia has dramatically hurt themselves and overreacted by what they're doing. I think vaguely I get an idea of where they were coming from, and it probably also indicates an intelligence failure that they underestimated the Ukrainians. But that aside, you have a situation where I think that the fundamental Russian demands could have been negotiated, and this whole war could have been avoided, and we might have actually had a neutral Ukraine between NATO and Russia that would have been a stabilizing factor, and Ukraine itself could prosper during that period, not be under anybody's military occupation or attack. But as it is, now that the situation is where it is, it's kind of hard to unwind it. I mean, the Western cancel culture went into action against Russia on a level that the government sanctions didn't even begin to address. You see, I mean, like the oil thing was already happening before the government under Biden actually made an executive order. And so I don't know. I mean, given where they are right now, you may be in a situation where Russia has little to lose at the moment, other than, in other words, they know that if they pull back, NATO and the United States will flush weapons into Ukraine. So at this point, they're already sanctioned to the hilt. So from their point of view, they're probably just going to keep on rolling, and this human catastrophe is going to continue. And now, and another issue that I have addressed before, I've got a little bit new information as of yesterday. It seems like I was reading an article, and it seems to indicate that we didn't know, there was a little bit of ambiguity of what Putin meant, but apparently he has actually increased his actual nuclear alert level. And that relates to things like I was suspecting, that a significant part of their land-based missile force, the part that would be of what's called second strike part, particularly, I think, is road mobile. They've gone to land mobile systems for survivability, whereas we are 100% silo housed ICBMs. Both have submarines with missiles, of course. U.S. I think has a bit better, quieter, more capable submarine and missile system out there than they do, but both of them have some that are adequate for the kind of damage that people are generally worried about in these scenarios. So there has actually been an actual change in the posture and behavior of Russian nuclear forces in this. And I was also reviewing various Russian missile systems yesterday, and they do have air-launched missiles that are of what's everybody's referring to as these hypersonic missiles that can be launched from aircraft, such as MiG-31s and their Tu-22 bombers, and so those weapons could be used to strike at NATO air bases. And that's why this whole idea of this misstated no-fly zone is just a really bad idea. And I think I've gone through that in the last video in detail. But I mean, I think that is what could cause the kind of escalation we really don't want to see. Because I don't see, if you get into an air war with Russia, and if it's a strongly pursued one, which I presume you're not going to do a half pursued one, I mean, you don't want to just get your plane shot down. You've got to shoot their planes down, basically, and that puts them in a position where, given I think the technical superiority of our fifth generation aircraft, they probably will resort to counter air base attack, and that's. But anyway, I just kind of got an idea that they do have missiles with the speed and range to probably penetrate defenses and achieve those goals. I hadn't really looked at what they actually had lately, and I'm like, that was pretty impressive. In fact, actually, that's an area where we're actually working to catch up on. So, and I don't know. I mean, it's possible that those attacks would be done with purely conventional explosive warheads or fragmentation. Well, maybe some kind of cluster munition type thing. But they might be something else, and that's why this is very dangerous. A quick aside, I know there's this thing where this ongoing battle over the Polish MiGs and what's going to happen with them. And the last thing that Poland wants to fly them to Germany. They hand them over to us, and then we're supposed to somehow deliver them into Ukraine. In other words, they're open to the planes getting there. They just don't want to be the source country and get on Russia's list for it. So they're a little intimidated right now because they know that if this thing escalated, they're the country that's probably most likely to get hit. And so that's kind of interesting. I had a suggestion: if you really wanted to send those in there, perhaps the best way would be to put them on big flatbed trucks and put a tarp over them and just drive them in at night. And that way they wouldn't show up on radars as such, and they probably would be indistinguishable from other trucks to some degree that would be coming in and delivering all these other weapons that we're providing. And it wouldn't, if you just want to not escalate it but get the planes in. The question I have is, what's the utility of that? As soon as they're put on the airfield, won't they be detected with spy satellite reconnaissance within at least a day and then targeted on the ground? I don't know. We'll see on that. I mean, I think there's a lot of mythologies coming out of Ukraine also about what they're doing. I mean, the idea that there's a really active, capable Ukrainian Air Force fighting the Russian Air Force over the skies of Ukraine, this doesn't seem to be the case. in the earliest days of the conflict, the first 2 or 3 days, I think, yes, some planes did survive getting knocked out and some bases survived. But it looks to me like I haven't seen much evidence of that lately. What I do see is surface-to-air missiles being fired, both shoulder-launched and some Russian designs that they've either captured or had prior to the war. Well, at any rate, that's it for today. Again, the addresses of my